Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be looking at what's possible in Midnight to do with add-ons. And remember, this is an important disclaimer. These add-ons are purely customization. They don't add additional features. Basically what Blizzard intended, add-ons can customize things, change how things look like, but they're not going to add additional functionality. But you can change a lot of things in terms of what you want to customize right now in Midnight. Now keep in mind, a lot of these add-ons are still work in progress. There's only a couple of add-ons that actually work in Midnight, or at least based on my testing so far. And this is what I was able to achieve with a couple of customization options. So let's start off with the add-on list. And what you can see here, I'm using a couple of add-ons. You don't have to use those. There's actually ways of achieving something similar by using 2 add-ons if you really want. This is my add-on list right now. I'm not using Dominoes. Dominoes is an action bar add-on that a lot of people are using to kind of skin it properly. I am kind of doing it a hacky way. These are action bars. You can see it right here. These are default action bars, and they actually have empty spaces in them, because if you go to the edit mode and if you go to the action bars, the minimum amount of icons you can have is 6. So if I only want to have 4 action bars here, I can't. So what I kind of do is that I untick always show buttons. So this is why I only have like 4 action bars, even though the minimum or action icons when the minimum is 6. So it's a little bit hacky, but it's something that I'm doing right now. In terms of other add-ons, Mask is another skinning add-on that I haven't used yet in Midnight, but I probably will end up using it at some point. Quality of Life or Enhanced Quality of Life Core is basically another add-on that is very similar to Leatrix Plus, which basically allows you to hide things like Talking Head, do some of the mails. It's just basically quality of life. The reason I'm using, or at least in this case I'm using Leatrix Plus, is because I want the square minimap. That's it. You do not have to use that. So these 2 add-ons are basically similar, do the same thing. Unitframes, Platynator, you probably heard this. I made multiple videos about Platynator. These are the nameplates right here. So I actually want to talk about nameplates a little bit more. So you can see here, if I select a target, I have these red arrows. A lot of people know about Platynator. So these are overlapping. It's kind of hard to select some of these mobs. And if you want to have a stacked option, so if you go to options, if you go to nameplates, this is the default Blizzard option. So if you go to stack nameplates and you take enemy and friendly units, you can see here I can select everything quite easily, but they're moving all over the place. Like, it's actually like, it's borderline unplayable. So this is something that Blizzard needs to focus on. They need to fix this, because if you have this option where you can select enemies really quickly if they need to be interrupted, the nameplates just move all over the place. So this is what I mean. So this is why you can't play with this option enabled at this given point. In terms of other add-ons, BetterBlizzFrames, you probably heard about this already. It works in Midnight. It's a great add-on. Can do multiple different things. It can actually change the way that your unit frames look like, remove the portrait. It's one of the new features that they added. They also updated their add-ons multiple times. Cooldown Manager add-ons, which I'm not using right now because I don't have Cooldown Manager enabled, or I only have the buff portion of Cooldown Manager. So for example, if I press Unleash Live, Unshust of Swiftness, I can see the buffs here, but I don't have the actual, if you go to edit mode, and if you go to the advanced cooldown settings, you can see I don't have any utility cooldowns enabled, and I don't have any track bars enabled. I only have tracked buffs. So for the people who don't know how to use the edit mode, for example, if you want track bars, let's say I put my Ascendance in here. So now I can have a bar instead of an icon. You can do that for pretty much anything. So you can see it right here. I can have a bar instead of an icon, but in my case, you can just drag and drop it on the track buffs and remove the bars, because the bars right now, I don't think they look all that great. So instead, I have these icons. But as I mentioned, I don't have anything in terms of essential cooldowns or utility cooldowns. If you do have that, I do think that add-ons like this, let me get out of here. I do think that add-ons like Clean Cooldown Manager or Cooldown Manager tweaks are pretty good, because they're going to sort your essential cooldowns, utility cooldowns in a better way. They're going to provide like centered look. I think these are pretty good, very simple add-ons. If you do end up using Cooldown Manager a little bit more, these are pretty good. In terms of some of the other add-ons, I'm using Click, and this is primarily, or a lot of it, for healers. You can see it right here. It's working in Midnight with no issues whatsoever right now. I'll talk about some of the tips and tricks a bit later on. I'm also using, so this add-on here, Kriegel's Media Tags, this is purely to have more custom textures, more custom fonts. Because if you go into add-ons like BetterBlizzFrames, And if you go to something like font and texture and you want to have different fonts and different textures, look how many different textures I can choose from. Look how many different fonts I can choose from. And this is because I have this add-on right here in terms of Kriegels media tags, which gives you more customization if you're like OCD like me and try to get a lot of different textures and, you know, all those things. And the big two add-ons that I feel like are pretty good right now is MidnightSimpleUnitFrames. So basically what you see here in terms of unit frames, in terms of the different name, my name has a different X and Y offset, you have the different HP textures, all of those things. This is done by this add-on right here in terms of MidnightSimpleUnitFrames. Keep in mind, this add-on is extremely raw and simplistic and buggy to some extent. I do think it's pretty good. In terms of Sensei class resource bar, I'm using Sensei class resource bar for my mana right here. Now, this add-on is absolutely amazing because it literally integrates into your edit mode. You go into edit mode and you can see here my primary resource bar. I can click on that and I have a bunch of options here in terms of different font, in terms of different textures. And then I have a secondary resource bar right here. So this secondary resource bar is going to be extremely important for any classes or specs, something like Holy Paladin, Preservation Evoker, who need to track things like, you know, your essences, your holy power, and all those things. So this is why on my Shaman it's not showing up, because I don't really have secondary resource bar. I only have mana. But if you're playing Holy Paladin, Preservation Evoker, or any class that has additional resources, it's very, very good. So some of the things I'm not 100% happy about, we talked about the stack nameplates. We talked about it already. I mentioned this, and if you go into nameplates, if you go to stack nameplates and you enable it, this needs to be fixed. This is all over the place. Hopefully Blizzard is going to look at that initially. Second thing, you see my buffs. When I press any of these buffs and they show up under cooldown manager buffs or icons, I don't really have a lot of customization options here. So if I go into edit mode and if I go to these tracked buffs and I go to advanced cooldown settings and I'll go to the buff section, you can see it right here. You can see all the buffs that I have here. I haven't found an add-on or a way to center these or to provide additional options. Most of the add-ons that I've seen to do with cooldown manager, they all focus on things like essential cooldowns. They all focus on things like utility cooldowns. I haven't found anything that allows you to customize track buffs. So the way that I have it configured here, you can see I have specific spots for specific buffs, which means that if I press something like Ancestral Swiftness, it shows up here, and then it shows my ancestors. If I press Unleash Life, it shows up here. If I press, for example, Healing Stream Totem, it doesn't center it. So this is something that I'm looking for in the future. Hopefully there's going to be additional ways to change or alter how these buffs are displayed in the cooldown manager. Now, if you're someone who doesn't want to use, for example, click or never used click, you can actually use Blizzard's default keybind setting. If you go to the keybind sections and you click casting, you can use this, which is basically Blizzard's implementation of click. Now, one of the biggest issues with this is that if you go to certain abilities that you want to keybind, for example, I want to keybind Earth Shield, that's fine. But if you go down to something like Purify Spirit, you can't keybind your Dispel, which just feels really bad. Well, there is a way to go about this. I've been told in some of my comments, which I think is actually insane. You can just drag this ability and place it in your click and change the keybind, and it will work, which I actually think is kind of insane. Now let's talk about some of the customization, and we're going to talk about, if we go to options, if we go to add-ons, we're going to talk about BetterBlizzFrames. So people might be looking at this right here and they might be like, are you using different rate frames? And these are the default rate frames. The only thing that I did, if you go to the BetterBlizzFrames, if you go to the font and textures, you can change rate frame health bar texture, you can change rate frame mana texture, you can change the fonts. So basically all I did was change the custom textures of the default frames. There's nothing else you can configure, at least I haven't found, in terms of how to make these icons bigger, how to change the icon position. There is no filtering, and that is to do with how Blizzard is implementing or restricting add-ons in Midnight. I'm not sure if filtering is going to be available through add-ons, or I can almost guarantee you filtering is not going to be available through add-ons unless Blizzard adds their own implementation to it. So we'll have to see that in the future. And you can change one font for all text in game. So in this case, if I change to something else, you'll see the font actually changes for these add-ons. It changes your chat text, it changes the font of some of these things. So if you don't like the default Blizzard's font, you can actually change it with this add-on. With BetterBlizzFrames, you have this option here for dark mode. If you don't want the dark mode, so if I untick this, you can see, okay, if I untick this and I need to reload UI, you'll see that my action bars and everything is not going to have this border around it. So if you want it to be like this, it's up to you. Outside of that, you have a bunch of features. You can actually, again, I'm not using frames here. I'm not actually using unit frames from BetterBlizzFrames. I'm using another add-on, as I talked about this before. I'm using MidnightSimpleUnitFrames. So for this example, if I disable MidnightSimpleUnitFrames and if I disable Sensei class resource bars and I just have BetterBlizzFrames, you'll see something like this. Now, BetterBlizzFrames have their own implementation of the unit frames without the portrait mode. So if you go back to options, add-ons, and BetterBlizzFrames, you can see here they have no portrait, they have no portrait pixel border option. So you can do multiple things with it. You can also go to miscellaneous and actually hide action bar keybinds. And this is what I mean by saying that these are just action bars and I have keybinds here associated with them. I'm just hiding them to look better. You might look at this, and the reason I decided not to use it right now is because there is no options, or I haven't found options to move my name. I can't really move my name into or change the X and Y axis. I can't really change the HP numbers. There's not a whole lot of configuration. So this is why I opted in to use BetterBlizzFrames. If I go back to add-ons, this is why I opted in to use BetterBlizzFrames with MidnightSimpleUnitFrames to make it a little bit better. But if you do decide to use BetterBlizzFrames instead, you can actually go into edit mode and change or increase the size of this. You can change, again, you might say that these frames look a little bit small, they're not really aligned properly. You can just increase the size, make them smaller, make them bigger if you want, and adjust it to your liking, and you can make it look really good if you really do want. I'm not going to save this, and I want to kind of showcase it, what it does. MidnightSimpleUnitFrames. So you can see what I'm doing here is that I have these unit frames and I have Sensei class resource bar, my mana bar shown here. Now, this add-on I said is extremely raw. In terms of, you can see here, it's very buggy. It doesn't always show my width and height and all of those, or the X location, Y location of things. So you need to be careful in terms of what you want to do. But you can configure it. You can change the location of the name. You can change the location of the HP text. You can show resources as well. You can see my mana being shown very small in this position here. You can go into the bars and change the bar textures. This is what I mean by the bar textures being, again, I also have an add-on that gives me additional custom options. You can also change the font and things like that. And you can go to the font section, change the font in terms of custom, in terms of the colors. So there is a new implementation for auras. Miscellaneous is to enable mouse over highlight. So if I highlight over myself, it'll show you a white border around it, which, again, it just depends if you want it or not. But this add-on allows you to have additional customization with unit frames, and I think it's really cool. And lastly, just very quickly, we'll talk about Platynator, and this is your nameplate add-on right here. And I think this is like the best option right now. You can go into add-ons, you can go into Platynator, or open the options. I'm going to try and showcase what the nameplates look already, but it's drag and drop type of thing. You can drag and drop anything. You can click into the settings, or you want to change the foreground or background texture. Unfortunately, I haven't found a way to add additional custom textures to this. It's something that I'm going to be doing in the future, because for my other add-ons, I have a custom texture and font add-on that is read by them, but it's not read by this add-on, so we'll have to see in the future. But you have a number of textures that you can pick, your cast bar options, your scale, your colors. You can also go into behavior in terms of what happens if you target a person or target the enemy. You can change the font. Again, I have not been able to add custom fonts to it at this given moment, but I'll work in the future. But this add-on is absolutely excellent, and probably I don't want to say must-have right now, but definitely a very, very, very nice little add-on that you can have in Midnight that's been working for a while. But overall, let me know which add-ons you're using in Midnight. Let me know which add-ons are working right now, which ones you find really interesting. Again, I didn't really cover a whole lot in terms of dominoes because I'm not using dominoes, but if you want a different texture for your action bars, for your buttons or anything, dominoes is probably going to be a good way. I talked about some of the issues that I have with the raid frames. Again, we talked about some of the issues about the cooldown manager, buff tracking, the nameplate jumping around depending on the style you choose, or depending on the grouping that you choose. Let me know which add-ons you're using. Let me know which add-ons you think are really cool in Midnight. And if this video helped, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next guide.